In the early 20th century, hundreds of young women were slowly poisoned while painting watch dials with radium. Their bodies literally glowed in the dark as they walked home from work, a haunting manifestation of their deadly exposure. This is the story of the Radium Girls, whose suffering and fight for justice transformed workplace safety in America and revolutionized our understanding of radiation's dangers. In the aftermath of World War I, a curious sight emerged in certain American towns. Young women walked home after factory shifts with an eerie blue-green glow emanating from their hair, skin, and clothes. These were the Radium Girls, factory workers employed by companies like U.S. Radium Corporation and Radium Dial Company to paint watch and clock dials with radium-infused paint. Their luminescent appearance, once considered magical, was actually the visible sign of their slow poisoning. Hundreds of women worked in facilities across New Jersey, Illinois, and Connecticut, unknowingly participating in one of America's most tragic industrial disasters, a cautionary tale of corporate negligence, scientific ignorance, and the human cost of progress. The painting technique these women were taught was called lip pointing. To achieve the fine detail needed for clock faces, they were instructed to shape their brushes by placing them between their lips, a method that ensured precision but caused them to ingest small amounts of radium with each stroke. Management repeatedly assured them the substance was completely harmless. Some workers even painted their teeth and faces with the luminous substance for fun, delighting in how they would glow at parties. These young women, mostly teenagers and young adults, had no reason to question their employers. They were proud of their well-paying jobs and enjoyed their reputation as the ghost girls, whose skin seemed to shimmer in the dark, unaware that this shimmering was a death sentence. Radium, discovered by Marie and Pierre Curie in 1898, was initially celebrated as a miracle element. By the 1920s, it had been incorporated into numerous consumer products that promised health and vitality. People consumed radium-infused water, chocolate, and toothpaste. Some even used radium suppositories. Its luminescent properties made it particularly valuable for military equipment and watches that needed to be read in the dark. The element was aggressively marketed as a health tonic, with products like Radithor water promising to cure everything from impotence to rheumatism. The public's fascination with radium was fueled by its mysterious glow and widely publicized healing properties. This widespread ignorance about radium's dangers extended even to the scientific community, who had not yet fully understood the devastating biological impact this radioactive element would have. What wasn't understood at the time was how radium behaves in the human body. With a half-life of 1,600 years, radium is chemically similar to calcium. When ingested, it replaces calcium in the bones, where it continuously irradiates the surrounding tissue from within. The results were horrific. Women began experiencing spontaneous bone fractures from simply walking across a room. Their jawbones disintegrated in a condition doctors called radium jaw. Tumors developed throughout their bodies. Many experienced severe anemia as their bone marrow was destroyed by radiation. Most disturbing of all, their bodies became radioactive themselves. When Amelia Maggia, one of the first victims, was exhumed 5 years after her death in 1922, her remains still glowed in the dark. The radiation was so powerful that it could expose photographic plates through wooden boxes. Some women reported that their handkerchiefs would glow when they blew their noses in the dark. Their breath contained radon, a radioactive gas produced by radium's decay inside their bodies. The suffering these women endured was excruciating. Molly Maggia, sister to Amelia, experienced such severe deterioration that doctors had to remove her entire lower jaw. Grace Fryer's spine collapsed, literally shrinking her height by several inches. Teeth fell out spontaneously, often accompanied by pieces of jawbone. The women experienced chronic pain, immobility, and disfigurement before their premature deaths. Their youth offered no protection against the radiation destroying them from within. Some were bedridden for years before death finally came. Many left behind young children and devastated families. The psychological trauma was immense. These once vibrant young women watched their bodies deteriorate while being told by company doctors that their conditions were their own fault, not related to their work. The pain was so severe that some begged for death, unable to find relief from the constant agony of their disintegrating bodies. As workers began falling ill around 1922, The companies employing them denied any connection between the mysterious ailments and radium exposure. The U.S. Radium Corporation went further, hiring experts to publicly declare radium's health benefits while privately commissioning studies that confirmed its dangers. Studies they subsequently suppressed. In a particularly cruel twist, company doctors diagnosed many of the women with syphilis, implying moral failings rather than workplace hazards were to blame for their conditions. This deliberate campaign of misinformation delayed medical treatment and legal action while more women were being poisoned. Internal company memos later revealed that management knew about the dangers of radium but continued to assure workers of its safety. Meanwhile, the company's own scientists and executives were handling radium with protective gear, precautions never offered to the women painting the dials. In 1925, Dr. Harrison Martland developed a groundbreaking test that finally proved radium poisoning was the cause of the women's illnesses. Armed with this scientific evidence, 5 women from the Orange, New Jersey plant, Catherine Schaub, Edna Hussman, Albina Larice, and sisters Quinta McDonald and Grace Fryer, decided to sue. However, legal representation was nearly impossible to find. Attorneys were reluctant to take on powerful corporations, and the women had limited financial resources. It wasn't until 1927 that attorney Raymond Berry agreed to take their case. The women faced enormous obstacles. Statutes of limitations had expired in many instances, and the companies employed delay tactics, hoping the women would die before the cases went to trial. Despite their deteriorating health, these 5 women persisted, determined to hold the companies accountable not just for themselves, but for all the affected workers. The Radium Girls lawsuit became a landmark case in labor safety rights. The women's plight captured public attention, with newspapers dubbing them the living dead. Their court appearances were dramatic. Some had to be carried into the courtroom on stretchers. After years of legal battles and delays, U.S. Radium Corporation finally settled in 1928, providing financial compensation and covering medical expenses for the plaintiffs. Though many of the women died before receiving justice, their legal victory established precedent for worker protection laws. Similar legal battles played out in Ottawa, Illinois, where women working for Radium Dial Company faced identical health issues. Catherine Donahue, barely able to walk and weighing only 65 pounds, testified from her deathbed. Her victory in 1938 came just days before she died. These cases directly influenced the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration and established the right of workers to sue corporations for labor-related illnesses. The tragedy of the Radium Girls paradoxically advanced scientific understanding of radiation. Their cases provided the first documented evidence of radiation's long-term effects on the human body, helping establish safety standards for the Manhattan Project scientists who would later develop atomic weapons. The women's suffering led directly to the establishment of radiation exposure limits and handling protocols that continue to protect workers today. Robley Evans, a physicist at MIT, studied the women for decades, measuring the radium in their bodies and tracking its effects. His research established the first safety standards for radium exposure and laid the groundwork for current radiation protection guidelines. The Center for Human Radiobiology was established in 1969 specifically to study the long-term effects on radium dial painters who survived. The women's bodies themselves became scientific resources that advanced our understanding of radiation biology, though this research was conducted without their informed consent. Perhaps most importantly, the Radium Girls case transformed workplace safety in America. It established that employers are responsible for occupational diseases, even those with delayed onset. It introduced the concept of time to file extensions for workers whose illnesses develop years after exposure. It also demonstrated that industrial safety knowledge must be shared with workers, not concealed from them. The case helped establish the principle that science and industry must be governed by ethical considerations, not just profit motives. Labor laws were rewritten based on the precedents set by these cases. Workers gained the right to know about workplace hazards, and companies were required to implement safety measures. The concept of workers' compensation was expanded to include occupational diseases, not just immediate injuries. These protections, which modern workers take for granted, exist in large part because of the Radium Girls' fight for justice. The legacy of the radium companies extends beyond the women they poison. These former radium factories remain contaminated today, with several designated as Superfund cleanup sites by the Environmental Protection Agency. The radiation in these locations will remain dangerous for thousands of years. Homes built on or near former factory sites have had to be demolished due to contamination. Soil has been removed from entire neighborhoods. Groundwater continues to show elevated levels of radiation in some areas. The environmental damage, like the human damage, demonstrates the long-term consequences of industrial negligence. The half-life of radium-226, the isotope used in the luminous paint, is 1,600 years, meaning these sites will remain radioactive long after our current civilization has passed into history. The cleanup efforts continue to this day, a reminder that the true cost of the radium industry has yet to be fully paid. The last known radium girl, May Keene, died in 2014 at the remarkable age of 107. She had briefly worked at a Connecticut clock factory in the 1920s but narrowly escaped the fate of her colleagues because she disliked the taste of the radium paint and thus refused to point her brushes with her lips. This small act of rebellion likely saved her life. Even so, she suffered health problems throughout her life that were consistent with radiation exposure. May lived long enough to see the story of the Radium Girls gain renewed attention in the 21st century. Before her death, she reflected on her fortune in interviews, expressing both gratitude for her survival and sorrow for her colleagues who weren't so lucky. Her longevity stood in stark contrast to many of her coworkers who died in their 20s and 30s. Their lives cut tragically short by their exposure to radium. The story of the Radium Girls serves as a powerful reminder of the human cost of industrial progress when untempered by ethical considerations and regulatory oversight. Their suffering led directly to safer workplaces for future generations and established important legal precedents that continue to protect workers today. What makes their story particularly poignant is the courage these young women showed in fighting powerful corporations despite their deteriorating health. They faced public scrutiny, corporate intimidation, and the knowledge that they were dying, yet persisted in their quest for justice. They were not just victims but pioneers who transformed American labor law. Their legacy lives on not only in labor laws and scientific understanding but also as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing profit over human life and the importance of questioning authority when worker safety is at stake. The women who once glowed in the dark continue to illuminate essential truths about corporate responsibility, scientific ethics, and the courage to stand up for justice. The Radium Girls tragedy represents both one of America's most shameful industrial disasters and one of its most important catalysts for change. These young women, who literally glowed with death, illuminated the path toward workplace safety protections we now take for granted. Their legal battles established precedents that continue to protect workers today, while their suffering advanced scientific understanding of radiation that would later save countless lives. As we benefit from their unwitting sacrifice, we must remember that these protections weren't granted willingly. They were fought for by dying women who refused to be silenced. The Radium Girls remind us that progress must be guided by ethics, that corporations must be held accountable, and that ordinary people can create extraordinary change even in their darkest hours. Their bodies may have been broken by radiation, but their legacy remains undiminished, glowing through history as a testament to courage in the face of corporate power and scientific ignorance. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates. Your feedback is appreciated. We hope to see you again.